Since the Flower Garland Sutra was the first sutra to be preached, there were no previous words of the Buddha for it to contradict, and so it naturally raised no doubts. In the case of the Great Collection Sutra, the Larger Wisdom Sutra, the Golden Light Sutra, and the Amida Sutra, the Buddha, in order to censure the ideal of the two vehicles demonstrated in the various Hinayana Sutras, described the Pure Lands of the 10 directions, and thereby inspired ordinary people and bodhisattvas to aspire to attain them. Thus he caused the persons of the two vehicles to feel confounded and vexed. Again, because there are certain differences between the Hinayana Sutras and the Mahayana Sutras mentioned above, we find that in some cases Buddhas appeared in the 10 directions, and others great bodhisattvas were dispatched from the 10 directions, or it was made clear that the particular sutra was expounded in the worlds of the 10 directions, or that various Buddhas came from the 10 directions to meet an assembly. In some cases, it was said that Shakyamuni Buddha covered the major world system with his tongue, while in others it was the various Buddhas who put forth their tongues. All of these statements are intended to combat the view expounded in the Hinayana Sutras that in the worlds of the 10 directions there is only one Buddha. But in the case of the Lotus Sutra, it differs so greatly from the previous Mahayana Sutras that Shariputra and the other voice hearers, the great bodhisattvas, and the various human and heavenly beings, when they heard the Buddha preach it, were led to think, is this not a devil pretending to be the Buddha? And yet those bleary-eyed men of the Flower Garland, Dharma characteristics, 3 treatises, True Word, and Nembutsa schools all seem to think that their own particular sutras are exactly the same as the Lotus Sutra. That is what I call wretched perception indeed. While the Buddha was still in this world, there were undoubtedly those who set aside the sutras he had taught during the first 40 and more years of his teaching life and embraced the Lotus Sutra. But after he passed away, it must have been difficult to find persons who would open and read the sutra and accept its teachings. To begin with, the sutras preached earlier run talk endless words, while the Lotus Sutra is limited in length. The earlier sutras are numerous, but the Lotus Sutra is no more than a single work. The earlier sutras were preached over a period of many years, but the Lotus Sutra was preached in a mere 8 years. Moreover, the Buddha, as we have seen, has been called the Great Liar, and therefore one can hardly be expected to believe his words. If one makes a great effort to believe the unbelievable, one can perhaps bring oneself to believe in the earlier sutras, but not in the Lotus Sutra. The people today appear to believe in the Lotus Sutra, but in fact they do not really believe in it. The reason is this: when someone assures them that the Lotus Sutra is the same as the Mahavirikkana Sutra, or that it is the same as the Flower Garland Sutra or the Amida Sutra, they are pleased and place their faith in this person. If someone tells them that the Lotus Sutra is completely different from all the other sutras, they will not listen to him, or even if they should listen, they would not think that the person was really speaking the truth. Nature is this to say. It is now over 700 years since Buddhism was introduced to Japan. During that time, only the great teacher Dingyo truly understood the Lotus Sutra, but no one is willing to heed this fact that Nichiren has been teaching. It is just as the Lotus Sutra says, if we were to seize Mount Sumeru and fling it far off to the measureless Buddha lands, that too would not be difficult. But if after the Buddha has entered extinction, in the time of evil, you can preach this sutra, that will be difficult indeed. The powerful assertions I am putting forward are in complete accord with the sutra itself. But as the Nirvana Sutra, which is intended to propagate the Lotus Sutra, states, in the defiled towns of the latter age, those who slander the correct teaching will be as numerous as the specks of dirt in all the lands of the 10 directions, while those who uphold the correct teaching will be as few as the specks of dirt that can be placed on a fingernail. What do you think of that? Would you say that the people of Japan can be squeezed into the space of a fingernail, would you say that I, Nichiren, occupy the 10 directions? Consider the matter carefully. In the reign of a worthy ruler, what is reasonable will prevail, but when a foolish ruler reigns, then what is unreasonable will have supremacy. One should understand that, in similar fashion, when the sage is in the world, then the true significance of the Lotus Sutra will become apparent. In my remarks here, I have been contrasting the early sutras with the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra, and it would appear as though the early sutras are in a position to prevail. But if they really went out over the theoretical teaching, then it means that Shariputra and the other persons of the 2 vehicles will never be able to attain Buddhahood. That would surely be lamentable. I turn now to the second important teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, was born in the Kalpa of Continuance, in the 9th period of decrease, when the span of human life measured 100 years. He was the grandson of King Simhahani and the son and heir of King Shuddhodana. As a boy he was known as Crown Prince Siddhartha, or the Bodhisattva all goals achieved. At the age of 19 he left his family, and at 30 he attained enlightenment. At his place of enlightenment, the world-honored one first revealed the ceremony of Vairocana Buddha of the Lotus Treasury World, the land of actual reward, and expounded the 10 mysteries, the 6 forms, the perfect inner fusion of all things, and the subtle and wonderful great teaching for immediate attainment of the ultimate fruit. At that time the Buddhas of the 10 directions appeared on the scene, and all the Bodhisattvas gathered about like clouds. In view of the place where Shakyamuni preached, the capacity of the listeners, the presence of the Buddhas, and the fact that it was the first sermon, is there any reason the Buddha could have concealed or held back the great doctrine? Therefore, the Flower Garland Sutra says, he displayed his power freely and expounded the Sutra of perfection and fullness,